Okay, the thing we're recording. Okay, so I missed out on the SCSS, but you'll remember it now. It's SCSS, CSS3, and SAS. Same thing. Yeah, so SCSS basically just is shorthand for Sassy CSS. I don't know why it's called Sassy CSS, that's beyond me. But yeah, they're all the same thing. You'll find that when you do your Rails projects and you set them up initially, that all of your CSS files will be just .css, like so. I would like you, going forward, to change all of those to be .scss. It gives you a few benefits, which we'll go over shortly. There's no issues with using either or. If you're comfortable using CSS more than SCSS, do that. But in terms of creating dry code and when you're trying to get a job in the future, if you know SCSS, that's the preferred way anyway.
So SCSS is backwards compatible, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. If you drop CSS in there, what it is all CSS. Like the differences are, for the most part, for what you'll be doing, quite small. But you can create things like variables in SCSS and reuse them throughout the code. So obviously you can have those benefits. You can do methods, you can do iteration, all that kind of stuff as well in SCSS. So but that's like super advanced stuff. But yeah, so for the most part, CSS kind of looks very, very similar to SCSS. So what I've done is I've created a Rails project from new, and yeah, I'm just going to show you a few things about CSS. How familiar are you with CSS in general? Ish, yeah. Yeah, I think even I would probably do that as well. Okay, so how familiar are you with the idea of external style sheets, internal style sheets, and inline styles? No, cool. Okay, so first thing I'm going to show you is how you would import your style sheets into your app. So you've all been into your layouts and seen your application HTML page, right? Okay, so you've got your head and you've got your body, yield, all that kind of stuff is all your Rails jazz. In the top here, in the olden days, you would have had a link to your style sheet, which would have been your, some folder within your app, and that would have stored your CSS pages. You may have done that in your Sinatra labs as well, potentially. But what I've done instead is I'm importing an external style sheet. So this is coming from something called Bootstrap, which some of you may have heard of. Bootstrap's pretty cool. It has a load of tools that you can use that you can just import into your app through class names. And the style sheet is quite literally that. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. So that is basically just CSS in one single line. Okay. This gets imported. Obviously, you think like this is just basically a load of strings, so it's not exactly the heaviest of things to import into your app. It's not really going to slow anything down, but it adds a ton of functionality if you need it and know how to use it. Like any good Rails project, though, I don't need to import it as a link like that as an external style sheet. I can use a gem, and for Bootstrap, you have a gem like this, Bootstrap SAS. Okay. I still need to put it into my file though. Just by simply installing the gem doesn't really do anything. I actually still need to tell it to sort of join my program. And I've done that here. You'll have two things you need to import. All of the instructions are on the gem as well, so this is not like stuff that you won't be able to know. If you go to the gem file on Git, it will show you all of this in the README. And you just import Bootstrap sprockets and then Bootstrap into your application.scss file. And it has to be your application.scss, not CSS, because that will not work. So your SCS file, and then I have access to that entire sheet without having to import it into my head. Okay, so that's importing external style sheet. That's using a gem for style sheets as well. But I still, even if I've done this, it still doesn't actually put it into my file. I have to use a Rails thing called style sheet link tag, and it goes to the application media all, and then all this does, you'll see it in the actual. I'll show you actually in the browser. This basically creates a link tag to your style sheets, but bundles it all through Webpacker, which yeah, Webpack, which yeah, I don't expect you to know what that is or care at the moment because you won't be using it, but you will do in React, and you'll see what that does. Basically bundles all of your code together, shoots it off into one, basically like a single line of code, like the like that external style sheet I showed you. So,
Is it compiled, or is it just?
yeah, it can do whatever it needs to do in order to get it in there. For JavaScript, when you get to that, it basically bundles all of your JavaScript into a single line, and it can minify it. Yeah. So when you actually open up, like if you do all your JavaScript and you put it into loads of different files, and then it all goes bundled through Webpack, it just turns it into one single file, and then puts it all into a single line, and then chucks it into your code. So rather than it all looking nicely formatted and all the rest of it in several different files, it's just one file and one big line of code. So yeah, Webpack does that. It can do that for CSS as well. Yes, so that's putting your style sheets. Okay, so style sheets. You'll all have these, and you'll look slightly different in your Rails apps. What I've done, because the bigger your application gets, right now you might be building something that has, say, 10 pages. So in order to be able to split off your SCSS into different files, it's not such a big deal. You'll be able to find where things are quite easily. I'm going to show you a personal app that I've got, and I'm going to show you how many style sheets I have. So these are all style sheets, and inside every single one of them, it can be pages and pages and pages of SCSS. And the thing being is, when you're building a full-scale app and you have SCSS everywhere throughout your pages, you need it to be split off in really distinct places so you can find it easily. So naming of your files is quite useful. And then splitting it off into different pages and different parts. So I've got one in here just with Bootstrap. You see these little dollar signs? These are variables, so I can reuse these variables throughout my app as well. But yeah, so mainly though, I just have like a component section. I import it into my application CSS file through an index. So, sorry, in my components, I've got all of these. I also have this little index file, there we go. This imports all of those little partials into this one file, and then this one file gets imported into components here. Okay, so splitting it off, very important when you go forward. Probably not for now, but I'd still get into a good habit of doing it. And at the moment, all I have is I have one page, which is a home page, here. So I have all of my CSS in one page because it's only that long. So there's no point me splitting it off any more than that. It's one page. It's quite simple. Okay, inline styles. Who's used inline styles before? Cool. So an inline style, for people who don't know, is literally adding the style attribute to one of your elements. And then you can put CSS directly into here. So I could, on my banner class that I've got here, I could have background image and use this. Well, actually I couldn't use this bit because this is ERB, but I could add the background image and have the URL straight into my CSS. But because I'm using ERB for this particular part, it's an asset path, so this actually grabs my image from one of my files. I decided I'd put the style straight in line with my div. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Good?
Style is a CSS.
Yeah, so style is basically, that opens it up to adding any CSS that you want in there. And then all you do is you'd split it by doing a little semicolon and then adding something else like color and then whatever. You just carry on doing that. So you can add as much as you like in there.
In which folder is the profile JPEG located? Asset path goes to.
Oh, for asset path. So this is located in images here.
So it's
Hello.
Asset images.
Yeah, this particular bit of code here is really tricky. Most of the time when you add an attribute to an element, you would use double quotation marks like this, and then put whatever you want inside. Except here, I have to use a single quote, then I'm using a double quote, and then I'm using a single quote. And if you don't do it in that order, it doesn't work. It honestly is right pain in the ass. Yeah, so if you change the way the quotations are set up, it just breaks it because Rails being silly. But yeah, don't worry about that. If you need help with adding in this particular bit of code into your code, give me a shout. I can give you a hand with that. But for the most part, yeah, you add double quotation marks and then whatever you like in there. Okay. Okay, so that kind of covers inline styles, external style sheets, and then your internal style sheets as well. So this is what you're going to be doing throughout your Rails app for your projects as well. You'll be using internal style sheets that you've brought in through your EIB helpers in your application.html. Make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. Right. I've just got to remember what I've actually got to teach you today. So, yeah. Okay, yeah, so we're going to be going over classes, IDs, element selectors, and how this affects your CSS. Okay, so working with CSS or SCSS, there's loads of different ways that you can access an element and change it. One of the things I would strongly recommend you don't ever do is add CSS to a specific element. So, element. Yeah, so I'll show you the HTML that I've got. So I've got these p tags here. If I wanted to change all of this text here, all of this text on this particular page and make it a different color, I could, if I wanted to, just select the p tag and then add a color to it. So
I was going to say a logo, but that would be an image anyway, so it would be.
Okay.
That you want it to look the same. So.
Yeah, images you would want to, but each image would be specific to the page that it's on. So yeah, I could go into my CSS, I could put P, and I could add a color here, and then change it. Add the color. It works for this page. Problem with this is that CSS doesn't do anything per page. CSS is bundled into every single page on your entire app, so across the entire thing. So if you go onto another page and you think, oh yeah, I don't want this text to be red or whatever, it will be red because you've selected the p tag. So that affects your entire app. So don't do that and especially don't do things like changing the body unless you know exactly what you're doing with it. Okay. Because you'll get to certain pages, you'll be like, I don't understand why this is not working, this is broken, this is over here, this is not doing the right thing. And then you'll find out that actually you've selected an entire element which works across your entire site. So just refrain from doing that. Use classes and use IDs. Does anyone know what a class or an ID is? Yeah? Okay. Well, my HTML that I've got here in my home page, I can see what it looks like. Obviously, I've got this enormous image. I've got this home bit down here. Pretend this is a button. It's not for the moment, but pretend it's like a link in a nav bar. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to create a nav bar for my home page. So first things first, I've got to do something with this image. So I've actually given this image an ID of logo. Does anyone know the difference between an ID and a class is?
The IDs we can assign to element of class can assign to HTML collection.
Precisely that. So an ID is unique. I only have one logo on my page, so I can give it an ID of logo and know that I'm not going to reuse it. If I wanted to reuse it on every single page, I have my logo up there, it's got its own ID, it's got its own set of CSS. If I have something like a form or a box I'm going to be using on loads of different pages, I can give it a class, and then it sets it within each of those pages individually. But go over that in a bit. So I've given this an ID. It means I can locate it on my page. That's what IDs are for. As said, I could have used the image element tag to select it, but then I've got 2 other images on this page, and it would affect those as well. So you don't want to be doing that. So the first bit of CSS I've got is this logo. I'm just changing the height to 50px. As soon as I refresh the page, fingers crossed, it goes very small. ID, that's it. So, and you'll use this in JavaScript all the time as well. So, dot for class, hash for ID. And that's just how you identify them in your CSS. All right. How to get rid of that? Okay, leave those there. Yeah, so I still have a problem here though. I need to get my home button to be over here somewhere. Actually, sorry, a little bit. Yeah, so I want the home button over here, and I want to have a background color for my navbar as well. I've given my navbar, as you can see, it outlines what the whole thing is. So it's given a class of Ed's navbar. I gave it that, that's me. I want to change it, so I've done all the CSS, written it in here. I've used the dot to tell that it's a class. I could have actually done an ID. I didn't need to do a class. It's probably going to have one navbar on my entire page, so I could have given it an ID instead, but we're discussing classes and ID, so give it a class. And hopefully that should do some jazz for us. Yay. Okay, so I've got something on here that I need to discuss with you, and it's called Flexbox. And this is something that's probably, yeah, like there's loads of different ways of formatting stuff on a page and aligning it, putting it into certain locations, doing what I've done there, split two things off into different sides of the page. You can use grids, CSS grids, which is something that I don't like at all, and I never use it, and never have had to really. I always use Flexbox. I think it's probably the best way of doing things responsively as well. So not only does it put it to the other side of the page, but if I reduce the page down, it just moves with it, like everything should. Hang on. There we go, back again. And one thing when you're doing CSS, and the same when you get to JavaScript, is always have this bit open here as well. Because I can make all the changes I want to my CSS here. And you can see, like, if I do space around, space between, space evenly, you can change it straight away on the page. And as soon as I've done that, as soon as I've made all the changes and made it look like I want it to look, I can just import all of that, copy and paste it straight into my CSS, and then I'm done. So rather than sort of thinking, okay, I need to write stuff flex, oh, I can't remember the next bit, you can just put it all into here, put it all into here, copy it, and then paste it straight back into your code. So I'm going to use that. I can change the colors here. The same thing. Colors are a really good one to use in here, because it's a pain to try and know the colors and the hash symbols, and you can use RGB like red, green, blue. You can use ones that have opacity to them as well. And obviously, if you're trying to remember them or trying to copy each individual line across, it would be a right pain as well. So yeah, I've changed everything I want to change in there. I'm going to change my text to red. Don't know why I'm making it look this disgusting, but there we go. And then you can just select all of that and then paste it in. That's it. That's that bit of CSS done. If I refresh, it should look exactly the same. Okay.
So this is just CSS.
This is just CSS.
Is Bootstrap something?
Bootstrap is just CSS. Well, there's a JavaScript side to Bootstrap as well, but only if you're using the JavaScript parts of it. So for the most part, Bootstrap is just CSS. So we can find the actual.
Are you using any Bootstrap? I don't know what it is. So are you using any Bootstrap at the moment?
I do have a little bit of Bootstrap in here, but I'll show you that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So Bootstrap. Let's see if I can find the actual.
I mean, the stuff you've just done, that could just be done with.
That's just CSS. Yeah. Yeah. That's all just CSS. So everything, and even when you do Bootstrap, all Bootstrap is just a bunch of this stuff already done for you. That's it. It's just CSS.
Like gems, I guess.
Yeah, kind of like a gem. It's basically someone spent the time to make something look good, and they've just gone, well, rather than everyone trying to recreate this themselves, just hand it off to them. So it's just in your code. So the only thing you'd need to do is add the right class name to some HTML, and then it will produce the thing for you. So it's quite cool like that. It's like it makes building stuff really, really good. Personally, I don't use Bootstrap a lot now. The things I use it for are forms and drop downs, modals, things that, like, if you try to build them yourself, like, yeah, you can clearly do them yourself, but it's so hard. It's so time consuming to do it. It's just easier to use something that already exists and put it in there. So I can show you some bits of that in a minute. Okay, so I now have this page. I've got some stuff here, but I want it to be centered. My image is, this is actually like a brick, but all I can see is like the tiny bit of mortar and the whole thing's red. So I need to make that smaller. So again, I've given this whole portion, well, I've given it an ID, class of banner. And I have given it a class this time because you can use banners quite a lot on your pages, so it's something that you'll use over and over again. Yeah, I've now set the background image as well, which is what you can see here. So I need to change that. So this is all of my banner CSS. Quite a lot. Do you want me to run through line by line what each bit does? Yeah? Okay, cool. So this should create something a bit nicer. Yay, there we go. So, a lot of CSS here. Okay, position relative. So you have position, you have two positions, two things that work together or in conjunction with each other. One's called position relative and the other one's called position absolute. You've also got, like, there's actually a ton of other positions on here, fixed, inherit, initial, all those sticky. But one that I want to use is position relative. Relative basically means relative to the page that it's on. So if I took that off, you can see it doesn't actually do anything. Nothing changes. So this position relative that I've got on the banner isn't actually for the picture that it's on, the entire div, it's not for that. I'm using position relative because I have another div inside it. Okay, no, I didn't give it that. Ignore what I just said there. But yeah, you can use position absolute and position relative to each other. It helps move things around. So you know when you see like a picture like this, and I wanted to have like a circle right in the corner as a notification or something like that. If you need it to be in the exact position on every single page, regardless of how big it is, you can use position relative and position absolute together on two different divs, and they'll match in together. They'll always sort of stick with each other. And that's really hard to do in CSS if you try and do it any other way, because they're two different things, they're in two different places. As soon as you squish the page, they'll move around. So yeah, use those two together. What I've done here though, I don't even need that, get rid of that, is I've set the text color to white. Text color, you don't actually use the word text color, it's actually just color. So color actually deals directly with the text itself. If you want to change the background color, that has background color. But yeah, text color is just color. So if I wanted to change that, change that, I can change the color here to anything I like. Okay. Text align center, see what that does. So that's just making it nice and sort of centered on my page. I then have these two bits here, 70 VW, which means vertical width. Not vertical width. It's vertical width, isn't it? No, view width, sorry, vertical. So you have view height and view width. So I've made this a circle by using these two bits together. So if I change that, see it does that. This all relates to the width of the page. So by giving the height and width 70, and the 70 is a percentage of the width of the page. So the width of my circle actually takes up 70% of the whole width of the page.
So if you
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if I now try and resize the page, so Sorry, my trackpad's
Can you
playing
use
up.
the thing up top then? Can you just do elements?
Yeah, sorry, up here. Yeah. This wasn't working on my. I don't think this actually works properly on the projector for some reason. Yeah, but essentially giving it that view width means that it stays 70% of the width of the page the whole time, regardless how big or small I make it. Okay, so that's
What was that changing it to iPhone?
up here. Yeah, I don't know why this doesn't actually work on the projector. I don't know why, but every time I've done it on the projector, it doesn't work. But yeah, normally on your PC, this should work. You can go and choose particular phone sizes. That seems to work. How random. Yeah. So this is all about responsive design. We won't go into responsive design too much because it's such a huge topic, and yeah, I don't want to sit you here for the next 3 hours going over it. So yeah, that's view width. You can use view height if you like, but yeah, if you want to make circles of your images, this is the way to do it. The other way, you notice I put the background image as an inline style for this particular div. If I wanted to say so I've got another image here, if I wanted to try and make this a circle, that would be really difficult, because like most images that you take on a camera or phone, whatever, they're not square, right? So trying to turn something that's not square into a circle is actually really difficult. The way I've done it here is I've created a div, and it's actually the div that I've made a circle, not the image. The image behind here is actually still square or rectangle, whatever it is. All I've basically done is made almost like a view hole behind it. So I can make the div any shape I like, and then it's just the image behind it that's staying the same. So if I go back onto, sorry, let's get this back again. Go back to the banner. These two bits here have got background position. I can move the image all the way across, do whatever I like with it. So you can see that the actual div, the circle, doesn't change. It's just the image behind it that moves. Background sizing or image sizing. You'll have this a lot with your images. I use background size cover, which means that it fits nicely into it. If I don't, you get a nice view of my chest hair. Okay. So yeah, contain does that. You always end up with an overlap of some sort. That can be left and right. You'll see on some crappy websites, you'll have like an image and then the start of the same image again. So cover gets rid of that.
It's a design choice.
Might be a design choice, yeah. Bad design choice, but design choice nonetheless. Yeah, so cover is one that I use for pretty much all my background image sizing, just because it offers to cover the entire page. Basically, I think the way it works is it actually looks at all the dimensions of your page and makes sure that that image is stretched out to them. So even if you have like a tiny, tiny little image and you use cover, it will stretch itself out to the page. Obviously, it might look pixelated, so you have to be careful with that. But ultimately, it means that you don't end up having like second runs of your image going across, which doesn't look good. If the image is small, yeah. Sorry, as in like, will it squish it down or like make it thinner? No. So the cover will maintain aspect ratio, but it will just make sure that it covers all corners of whatever your div you set it to. So yeah, there we go. Display flex. I think I did that for the second slide. We discussed display flex as being the way to organize your data on your page. You can change the direction of flex as well. So I've done it as a column, so straight down, but you can do it as a row as well. Probably won't change much. No, it doesn't change much on here. I think it is actually already a row. Align items. So display flex, I've done it on the overriding div. Aligning those items aligns it to the center of the page. justify content center, so it does it that way around. So yeah, if I take both those off, it ends up there, which is the top left-hand corner of the div. So add those back in. Border radius, this bit is that. Okay?
So is that actually changing the div?
Yeah, that's the div itself.
Is all of this CSS here changing the div? Right.
Yeah, all of it.
This particular div?
This particular div.
With the class ban.
Yeah.
It's a div or a class called that.
Yeah.
See the top down and the top left of the style window on the right.
Actually, yeah, sorry. Is that a bit better? Sorry, that was a bit too small, wasn't it? Yeah, so this is all acting on the div itself. So yeah, if I took away the image, you wouldn't obviously see the circle or anything like that, which is, yeah, it's why I tend to use with images, trying to actually put them into a div as a background image, because then you have more control over the actual image itself. If you just put an image into your file, like I've got down here, I couldn't do this kind of stuff. I could probably, actually, not that I would necessarily try, but border radius. Yeah. See, done the same kind of thing, but if I do, so width, so 70 W, height, 40 W, this distorts the image. So I've squished the image into a square, then given it a circle. Now it's kind of like changed the aspect of the actual image itself. Still created a nice circle, but yeah, that's not the actual dimensions of the image itself. So the original dimensions are like that. So that's why if you do it inside a div, it's much more creative freedom over it. Okay. So where are we down to? Yeah, border radius. I think once you go past 50%, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. You could do 1,000,000% and it wouldn't change it. So 50% just does. There. Okay, margin auto. I think this is to use to center the entire image on the page. So basically, it calculates the margin between the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and then just puts it in the middle. So it's quite a nifty little trick to do that. And margin top. You use margin top and margin bottom quite a lot in order to space out things. So can I just say right now, if I see a BR element inside your HTML, I will delete it. Okay, no BR elements, you don't need them. CSS covers all of that. So line breaks are basically just add lines of stuff between your code, but it's not good practice. It's not nice. Just if you want to space something out, use something like margin top, and then you can have the creative freedom over it to change it and do whatever you like. Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we probably actually need to do another topic on this as well. I was discussing this with Vasil earlier. When you design a page, you do something called a wireframe, which is just, you know, you could build it in like a Word page if you like, and you know, make it design it exactly how you would like. It obviously isn't a web page, but then you have to go and build it. You know, how do you do that? How do you separate each bits of your code? Like, how does that all work? Divs basically give you that sort of boxing to all of your pages, but simply by putting a div in there doesn't do this. Like, you need to know exactly where things are placed and how they place themselves. But yeah, generally I split up my code. I think, yeah, on here I didn't, just because I was doing it very quickly, but most stuff I do on a page would be split into each individual divs. Generally that's how you work anyway. You can leave stuff freeform, like I've got all of these freeform in here. But putting something into a div again gives you that creative control over your content. Means you can move it around in one big chunk rather than each individual line. So yeah, that's
How does margin top place BR?
They're two different things. But BRs are just crap code. Yeah, like if you go and get a job and someone looks into your HTML and sees you've got BRs in there, don't expect to get a job. Yeah, honestly, line breaks are just they're useless. Like they're things that most people, if you've had a crack at WordPress at one stage. You've used it to try and split up your bit of code here, there, and everywhere, but don't use them. Margin top and margin bottom are just they're things that you would always use when you're doing pages, and you can use other things called padding as well. Like in fact, you can see this little description here. So this is the margin outside of my image. The border, I don't have one, so I didn't set one. You then have padding. Padding is the inside of everything. So if I set the padding on this, it probably made the image smaller, but the actual div would stay the same size. And then you have the internal dimensions of the actual image itself, or div. So yeah, these are the bits that you change. And margin 66, you can see there, is exactly the same as there. Okay. Google's put this on here for you. Use Google, they're much better than line breaks. Okay, so we're on to the next part, which is this little bit of stuff here. This is a title that I've put in. Yeah, it's just a H3. Actually, have I done anything with that H3? Yes. Yeah, actually, yeah. First bit of Bootstrap. The crappiest bit of Bootstrap ever, but a bit of Bootstrap. So Mark is a Bootstrap class. So in my CSS file, I have no CSS relating to Mark. It doesn't exist in here, but it is a bit of Bootstrap. So by putting it in, it gives me this background. Oh, sorry. Here. So you can see the dot mark here. Background color, this nasty looking yellow, and then it's giving me some padding as well. And this all comes from this one file here, which is our Bootstrap file. So this is all Bootstrap, every single one of these. It's like, I think it's like 10,000 lines of Bootstrap that imports into every single page on your website. Now, this is really cool, but there are a couple of issues with importing Bootstrap into your files if you don't need it. Is giving things class names that make sense. So, like I have a navbar, right? If I just called my navbar, it should remove all the CSS because my CSS relates to Ed's navbar. But it won't. There'll be some stuff because Bootstrap has its own navbar class. Doesn't do exactly what I want it to do, but it has a navbar class. The problem with having both on there, if I set up my CSS here now, I just call this navbar, I'll have both bits of CSS on my page at the same time. So yeah, you see here, navbar, it's got all of this stuff here. I didn't do that. That didn't come from me. That was Bootstrap. So I now have two bits of CSS going in together, and this happens. And this is the most frustrating thing about having Bootstrap in your file. So that Bootstrap names stuff like you would name stuff yourself. So the amount of times I've gone like pulling my hair out going, I don't understand, I haven't done this, why is this not working? And that, like you see, like small things here. So you can see like there's a little border radius on the edge of that banner, like crap like that. Like, and then you're pulling your hair out, and then you realise, oh yeah, I've named it something that Bootstrap's got the same name as. So just be really careful. Yeah, with good reason. It's a problem when you go forward. Like if you just do everything bootstrappy, like you set your navbar Bootstrap, you do buttons, everything you do is Bootstrap, columns, rows, all that kind of jazz. It's fine. You won't have any problems because you're not creating your own CSS. It's only when you try to sort of override it or do something in conjunction with it that you end up having these conflicts, which can take quite a long time to fix, especially if you don't realise they are problems that you've caused yourself. That's always the worst one because you're always looking around for some bug and there isn't one. So yeah, just Bootstrap.
So does Bootstrap always do it with classes rather than IDs?
Yes, yeah, there isn't such a thing as a Bootstrap ID. So yeah, everything's a class because it's all supposed to be reusable. So it means that you can just add a class to anywhere on your page and it will have the desired effect.
So is it a bad workaround to say, okay, I can just use an ID rather than class and then avoid
No.
bootstrap me?
As a way of avoiding Bootstrap, no, that's not a great way. But as a way of, it's just use IDs where you are building something unique. But you'd always come up against that problem if you have to give two separate IDs because IDs are unique. So you can't have the same ID on the same page. So if you have whatever it is that's on the page has to be unique completely. So even if I added two logos to the page, that wouldn't work. That have the ID logo, just doesn't like it. So just be careful. Like IDs are great and you use them all the time, but just make sure that whatever you're doing it on is unique to that page. Okay, we're going to discuss about the whole cascading style sheet thing. So yeah, as we said before, cascading style sheets, quite literally cascading downwards. So whatever you put into your style sheet, the last thing on the style sheet is what gets read and used. What I mean by that, so I'm just going to, don't worry about this. Yeah, no. Absolutely not. Yeah, another thing, if I see people using important, I'll delete the code. So yeah, I've got, in my HTML, I've got this list with a class list. It's also got an ID called list as well. And you can see I've got some inline styling. So this one is black, the rest of them are blue. And that's because I've set my UL, and everything inside my UL has now been given this color. Apart from that one here, which I've set its own color to black. If I take that out, it will go blue. Super. But I've given this list a list class and set the color to green. And you can see that it will change to green. And this is called the order of specificity. It's quite a hard word to say. But yeah, the more specific your CSS is, the more overriding or the more power it has over what was there before. So, given it a class of list and a color green, but I've also got an ID for it as well. And I've given it the color purple. So, what do you think is going to happen here?
ID will override the class.
Yeah.
Yeah, because IDs are more specific. Okay, purple.
On the bootcamp track, they have a really big lab. So
Yeah.
graffiti.
Oh yeah, the
Okay.
graffiti one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd recommend anyone to do that. Yeah.
So even though I've set the ID first and then I've got the class next, because ID is more specific, it still stayed purple. Okay, and you'll actually be able to see in here, sorry, on this list, you can actually see where the class has come in, and they've put a score through the color green. So it's taken it in, but it's seen that it's got an ID, and it's seen that ID's got a color as well. So it's gone, actually no, that's more specific, we'll give it that color instead. Okay, then I've done some stupid stuff in my code, and I've added another list section into my CSS. What do you think is going to happen here? Yeah, exactly. It's going to replace it. And that's because of the cascading style, is that it reads it, but this list, the next list, came last. So it will read the last thing. If that thing overrides it, it will use it.
Does it not do that in all? Because in Ruby it does that. If you define a method and then define it later on, then you just rewrite that method.
Yeah, it's because methods don't have. If you've done JavaScript, you can only have const, so it sets it in stone, means you can't change it. Basically, Ruby doesn't have that. It doesn't have like a way of setting it in stone. So if you redefine it later, you have redefined it. Similar kind of thing, except not quite with CSS. So don't. I know you see the reference, but not quite the same. I've then done another really stupid thing, is I've set a class list in here again. I've given it the color green, But then I've set this bit here. So this is part of the CSS benefits that you get, is that you can add extra things in here. What do you think is going to happen?
For the most part,
Only the slides.
yeah.
So more or less specific?
It's less specific, it's class.
More specific.
It's more specific.
Yes, yes.
So the list, this bit here, this is just referencing the UL element, the whole UL element. But this bit here is referencing the exact line items inside it. Okay. So this will change it to Aqua. Aqua? Aqua. How about that? Okay. So that's more specific. So yeah, it wouldn't matter if I gave this the ID or the class, it'd be the same thing.
But it's like the default is green.
Yeah, so I've like given it the green, but because it's got the actual LI within the list, that's the most specific thing that you can do. Apart from adding individual IDs to all the list items, that would probably be more specific than that. But this is basically order specificity is going through that. So if you do desperately, if you have this thing where you're trying to override something, it's not working, you can just do that all in your CSS, just make it the most specific thing in there. How do you mean? No. If I did and an li, you have to do it within either a class or an ID set. So I can't just write like and li like that. It doesn't quite understand what that part is. Essentially, this bit here, if you were doing this in CSS, it would look like li and list, or like that. Okay. The annoying bit about this is that you'd have to split your code up to do list and then list li and then anything else. Whereas, like you've seen here, I can just put it all inside banner. It's just a lot cleaner, a lot nicer to read, a lot nicer to write as well.
Is that CSS or
That's SCSS. So if you have your files as CSS and then try to do this, it will throw an error, won't understand what it is.
It's not a preference, right?
Pardon?
It's just not a preference, like if I prefer the bottom line.
Yeah, especially if you're changing your files as SCSS, which I say always definitely do that. You can still write it like this if you like. That's completely up to you. It just means that you'd have to write essentially list twice and have two different blocks of code rather than just having one. Right. I'm going to talk about a thing that you mentioned that I don't want anyone to use. Some of you may have seen something called an important tag. Yeah? Okay. Which looks like this. And what this does is it trumps pretty much anything. Not always, but most stuff it does. Yeah, it's actually too specific for it. Oh no, it's giving it the colour green. I think it's because the, yeah, actually I won't do it on this one. This one's kind of misleading. I think you can even have double importance. Not that you should ever do that. But like, let's see, works. Don't think it will. No, didn't like it. Yeah, but we have this kind of issue. So go back to here. So we've just got IDs and classes sort of battling it out over which colours should take preference. I think if I give this tag here, no, did that work? Oh, I didn't save it. Try that. There we go. So yeah, this is one way to override things. Like, use it as the very, very, very last resort of anything you do. Because all this means, if you're using the important tag here, this just means that you've done something else wrong. Okay? So there's another way around it, essentially, which doesn't require using this important tag. This is just not good practice, because when you come to use whatever classes and things you've used next time around, you're still going to have the same problem. So we're going to be leading into the same problems. So try and find out what the actual reason is that you're having to use it, and then change that reason. So try not to use important tags. Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else I need to teach you today? Box model? No, don't do that. Yeah, CSS grids and box models are two completely different things. I wouldn't use them just yet. Like, have a look into them. It's easy enough to learn. Yeah, there's loads of like places. You go to Bootstrap. I'll show you this now. Documentation, components. Okay. So this is why I use Bootstrap, because you can do really nice looking things like this for you. If we go to buttons, there we go. Okay. So if I create a button and then I give it the class BTN primary, it will give me a nice looking button like this, all nicely formatted. When I hover over it, it changes the color. It does a nice format on the outside of it. And if I click it, it changes as well. So it's done a huge amount of CSS for me without having to do anything manually. Back in there, I've added two to my page down here. Okay, these are Bootstrap buttons. Like, I think majority of people when they start building stuff use Bootstrap buttons. And you can see the amount of CSS that goes into them. So the BTN primary is basically just the color, the border color, everything like that. But the BTN, this is what it does for you. So it's built all of that in for you. Okay?
Can you just copy the code from
Yes.
CSS?
Yes. And that's the thing. In a lot of ways, like if you go to, say you find a page and you really like the look of it and you're like, oh, that CSS is dope, I want to use it, copy it. It's literally on the page. All you have to do is inspect the element, find out where the CSS is and copy and paste it in. As long as you can see the div structure and how they've used it, it's all available to you. So I'd recommend doing that as a practice method anyway, because it's useful. Like, I've done it on Airbnb. They've got some really cool stuff. Use it. It's there. It's available to you. Yeah. So I'd say, yeah, it's a really good idea. Even if you go onto the Bootstrap page and you're like, oh yeah, this button looks really cool. I want to use that. You can inspect it in the same way. Click the button. Oh look, here's all of that, and just copy it. There you go. And I have all the CSS for the button. I haven't had to import the whole of Bootstrap. Okay, because it doesn't change your site like importing the whole of the Bootstrap CSS file. It's not going to slow your site down or anything like that. But it's a tiny bit wasteful, especially if you can have conflicts as well, where you're creating buttons, you're creating nav bars and things like that, and you're having to override Bootstrap's own stuff because your naming convention is quite similar. But yeah, do that. It's a good way of doing it. And then you've got the good things about Bootstrap, things like this, which require a bit of JavaScript. And it can do things like this. Like, you can build that yourself, but I'm telling you, it's really difficult. So yeah, it does. There's a lot that goes into it to build something like that has a bit of JavaScript. I can click off the page and it goes away. I've got all these buttons here. Like, that stuff isn't easy to do. That requires quite a lot of time and practice. I've done it. I've made my own modals before. Waste of time. It still doesn't look as good. But yeah, you've got loads of stuff that you can use. What's the other one? Carousel for images, like that. that's the kind of cool stuff you want to use with like Bootstrap. Yeah. But if you start importing JavaScript into your pages, there's some other libraries that you can use, like Slick. Here we go. So Slick Carousel. So like you can import all of this, and then with a bit of jQuery, you've got loads of cool things that you can do. Like that. Yeah. Pardon?
It's lazy loading.
Lazy loading. Where's that? Oh, this one here. So yeah, so it just loads it as it comes in. Yeah. So there's loads of different ones you can use. I've used this one quite a lot. It's quite good to have this on an automatic transition for like big pages where you want to have a nice big page and then you just want the image to change around. I did one for a customer recently. And it's based on the same principle. He liked these buttons. I don't know why. I did it as a joke, and then he was like, "I love them." But yeah, that's the same thing. So it's like a slide as well. Yeah, CSS is a huge topic. I've taught you that much today. And then obviously when you get into JavaScript, you're using JavaScript and CSS all the time as well in conjunction with each other. So yeah, that's pretty much it today. So thank you for coming. Yeah. Any questions before you leave?
Any like resources for kind of like basic web design in the sense of, so there's of course CSS, but kind of like, all right, is there a nice way to put something?
Yeah. Like twofold. You have CodePen, which does a lot of like design work as well, and there is another site which is the name's slipping from my mind, but there is another site which just takes into loads of design work. So, for instance, if you have like a banner for your front page and you really want to know some good designs or just get some ideas for banners, you can type like banner into it, and it will just show you thousands of designers who all design different banner pages. Pardon? Yeah, so it's something like that. Yeah, I'll see if I can dig it out for you because I've used it a few times, and certainly when it comes to like profile pages and things like that, it's good to see just what something could look like, and then trying to recreate it in HTML and CSS is actually that much easier because you can sort of see how it looks and functions and stuff. Yeah, there's quite a few sort of bits on the web that you can use, but CodePen's a good one if you want to see the actual CSS and HTML that goes with it as well. Yes?
I have a friend with like 15 years JavaScript developer, and he said you should never use inline styling. What's your opinion on inline styling?
I mean, yeah, I've apart from showing you on that, the only reason I use inline styling there is because I'm using an ERB helper inside this bit. Yeah, that's it. Apart from that, I hardly ever use inline styles. No. Okay. All right.